I died on a Tuesday. The worst part wasn't the pain. It wasn't the fear. It was finding out, while my heart was literally stopping, that I was the only one who didn't know my marriage was already dead. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. You're going to love it here. Let me take you back to the beginning. I'm Jasper Bryce. I am 44 years old, Regional Sales Director at Bryce & Briggs Consulting. I drove a charcoal gray Audi and grilled the best ribs in our neighborhood. And I say that without a single drop of humility. I was by every measurable standard a good man, living a good life. Or so I thought. It was a Tuesday in October when Todd, my coworker, my lunch buddy, the man who once ate an entire bag of chips during a Zoom call and blamed it on technical difficulties, found me collapsed face down on my keyboard in my office. He said the email I'd accidentally sent to the entire floor read, JJJ. 12 people replied asking what it meant. Todd called 911, then he called Renee. And this is where the story stops being funny. I don't remember the ambulance. I don't remember the paramedics. What I remember, and I know how this sounds, is a strange, weightless quiet, like being underwater but without the panic. No pain, no noise, just stillness. And then Dr. Pamela Rowan's voice, sharp and commanding, cutting through the dark like a flashlight. Stay with me, Tyler. Stay with me. I remember thinking, lady, I am trying. When I fully came to, I was in the ICU. Tubes in places tubes should never be. Alessia, my nurse, a woman with the energy of someone who has seen everything and is impressed by nothing, was adjusting my IV with the casual efficiency of someone making a sandwich. Welcome back, she said, not even looking up. How long? I managed. 3 days. I blinked. 3 days. You coded twice, she said, finally looking at me. Dr. Rowan pulled you back both times. You're a lucky man, Mr. Bryce. I looked around the room. Flowers on the windowsill. From the office, the card said, a get-well balloon from Todd, which, God bless him, had a picture of a grilling spatula on it because he knew me. A half-eaten box of chocolates on the side table, and an empty chair where my wife should have been. As my wife, I started, Alessia's face did something small and careful, the kind of micro-expression trained professionals use when they don't want to say what they're about to say. She's been informed, Alessia said. She called this morning to check in. Called, not visited. Called. She called, I repeated. Yes, I coded twice and she called. Alessia straightened the already straight blanket on my bed. I'll let Dr. Rowan know you're awake. That was the first crack. Small, almost invisible. Like a hairline fracture in a wall you've lived in for 11 years and never once questioned. Dr. Rowan came in 30 minutes later with the kind of calm authority that made you want to do whatever she said immediately. She explained what had happened. A major cardiac event. A blockage. Emergency intervention. She said I'd need at least 2 weeks of rest, monitoring, and absolutely zero stress. I almost laughed. Your wife, she said carefully, setting down her clipboard, mentioned there's a trip planned to Hawaii, Maui. I said, 5 days. We planned it 3 months ago. Tyler, I need you to understand the severity of what your body just went through. You cannot be alone. You need someone with you. I'll call her, I said. She'll come. The look Dr. Rowan gave me was not a look I understood in that moment. It was only later, much later, that I would replay it and realize what it actually was. It was pity. Todd came to see me that evening. He walked in holding a paper bag from the deli down the street from our office, looked at the hospital food on my tray and said, without missing a beat, I'm saving your life a second time. I actually laughed. First time since waking up. He pulled up a chair and sat down, and for a while we just talked about nothing. Sports. Office gossip. The chips on Zoom incident, which I brought up purely for the joy of watching him deny it again. And then, like turning off a light switch, his face changed. Has Renee been in? He asked. She's coming, I said. She just needs to sort some things out. Todd nodded. Slowly. The way people nod when they don't believe you but love you too much to say so. Todd. Yeah? What aren't you telling me? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and stared at the floor for a long moment. Nothing, man. I want you to focus on getting better, that's all. I studied his face. Todd Briggs is a terrible liar. Always has been. The man once tried to surprise me for my birthday and accidentally told me about the party 3 days early because, and I quote, the secret was too heavy. He was carrying something heavy right now, but I let it go. I was tired. I was weak. And honestly, part of me didn't want to know. Renee called that night. Her voice was warm, concerned. All the right textures of a worried wife. Baby, I've been so scared, she said. How are you feeling? Is the doctor taking care of you? I coded twice, Renee. A pause. I know. It's been so hard not being there, you have no idea. Then come. Silence. Tyler, the trip is in 5 days. We've already paid. The flights are non-refundable. Renee. I said her name the way you say it when you need someone to understand that what you're about to say is not a request. I almost died. I know that. Her voice shifted. Something underneath the warmth. Something harder. And you're stable now. You're okay. You have doctors, you have nurses. I want my wife. And I will be there the second we get back, I promise. It's only 5 days, Tyler. You're going to be fine. I stared at the ceiling. The fluorescent light above me hummed. Who are you going with? I asked. Another pause, shorter this time. Expertly managed. Carol and the girls, she said. You know this. I did know this. Carol and the girls. The usual answer for the last 2 years whenever I asked about girls' trips, late nights, and unexplained absences. Carol and the girls was the most reliable alibi in our marriage. Okay, I said. Okay. She sounded surprised, maybe relieved. Yeah, I said quietly. Have a good trip. I hung up, and I lay there in that hospital bed, in the hum and beep of machines that had literally kept me alive, and I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Not yet. Something quieter than anger. Something that settled at the bottom of my chest like sediment. It was clarity. They flew out Thursday morning. I know this because Todd told me, without meaning to, when he came to visit and mentioned the airport traffic had been insane that morning. I know it because Alessia, professional, unflappable Alessia, came in to check my vitals and asked if I had family coming this weekend. And I know it because I called the house 3 times Thursday afternoon and nobody answered. I lay in that bed for 5 days. Alone. Getting stronger in body while something else, something I hadn't named yet, was quietly rearranging itself in my mind. The doctors said I came back from the dead. What they didn't know, what I didn't fully know yet, was that the man who came back was not entirely the same man who went under. I was softer on the outside now, quieter. I smiled more actually, asked people how their days were, and meant it. But underneath all of that, in the place where the clarity had settled, I was watching. They came home on a Sunday, and when they walked through that front door, tanned and laughing, rolling suitcases behind them, the man sitting at the kitchen table smiled and said, "Welcome home." Neither of them noticed, not yet, that the smile didn't reach his eyes. If you've made it this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, but it costs you nothing and means everything to us. Thank you genuinely. There's a particular kind of power in being underestimated by the person who knows you best. She thought she knew exactly who walked back through that door. She was 11 years wrong. Let me tell you something about surviving a near-death experience that nobody puts on the motivational posters. It doesn't make you fearless. It doesn't flood you with gratitude and light and a sudden desire to run marathons. What it actually does, at least what it did to me, is make you precise. Suddenly you have zero tolerance for noise, zero patience for performance. You start seeing people not as who they present themselves to be, but as the sum of their choices. And choices, unlike words, don't lie. Renee had been speaking for a long time. I just hadn't been listening. The first morning after they came back, I woke up before she did. I made coffee, set 2 mugs on the counter, stood by the kitchen window and watched the neighbor's dog chase a squirrel it would never catch. And I thought, I understand you completely, buddy. Renee came downstairs in her silk robe, hair wrapped, smelling like the coconut sunscreen that still clung to her skin from 5 days of Maui beaches. She stopped when she saw me standing there. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep," I said. "Coffee's ready." She poured herself a mug and leaned against the counter. "How are you feeling?" She talked for 20 minutes about sunsets and snorkeling and a restaurant on the water where the shrimp tacos were, apparently life-changing. She talked with her hands the way she always did when she was animated, and I stood there, mug in hand, nodding in all the right places, watching. Because here is what I noticed. In 20 minutes of talking about a 5-day vacation, she mentioned Carol exactly once, in passing. Like a footnote, Carol, who was supposedly the reason the trip couldn't be cancelled. Carol, who I'd never actually spoken to on the phone in 2 years despite Renee apparently spending every other weekend with her. Did Carol enjoy the shrimp tacos, I asked? A half-second pause. Microscopic. She loved them. Good, I said. I'd love to hear about it sometime. Maybe we could all have dinner. You, me, Carol, her husband. What's his name again? Renee looked at me over the rim of her mug. Jeff. Jeff, I repeated, smiling. Right. Let's do that sometime. She smiled back. Neither of us meant it. I went back to the office 2 weeks later, against Dr. Rowan's mild protests and Todd's dramatic ones. Todd met me at the elevator with the energy of a man who had prepared a speech. Before you say anything, he started. Good morning, Todd. I just want to say that I support you, whatever you're going through, and I'm here. And also, you look terrible. Thank you, I said. I missed you too. We walked to our offices, and he stopped at my door, leaning against the frame. His voice dropped. Tyler, man, are we going to talk about it? I sat down at my desk, same desk where my heart had stopped. Someone had cleaned the keyboard. I noticed the keys were slightly shinier than before. Todd, probably. Talk about what? I said. You know what? I looked at him. Todd Briggs, who had eaten chips on a Zoom call and blamed technical difficulties. Todd Briggs, whose face could not hold a secret for longer than 72 hours. Todd Briggs, who had known something in that hospital room and chosen, out of love, to stay quiet. How long have you known? I asked. He closed my office door behind him. He sat down. And then he told me. It had started, according to Todd, about 8 months ago. A company mixer. Renee had come to pick me up. I remembered this, a Thursday evening. She'd worn the green dress. And Griffin Sloan had been there. Griffin Sloan, who worked in the mergers and acquisitions firm 2 floors above ours in the same building. Griffin Sloan, who was 41, recently divorced, and had the kind of jawline that made secretaries forget what they were typing. Todd said he'd seen them talking by the bar for 20 minutes, while I was across the room doing what I always did at company events, being excellent at small talk and terrible at leaving. He said he hadn't thought much of it then. He started thinking more about it 3 months later when he saw Renee's car parked in the building garage on a Saturday, a day when I was in Cincinnati for a conference. I didn't want to assume, Todd said. I could have been wrong. But you weren't, I said. He shook his head. I should have told you. You're telling me now. Tyler. Todd. I held up a hand. I'm not angry at you, I promise. He looked at me the way people had been looking at me since I got out of the hospital, like they were searching my face for the version of me they recognized. The loud one. The one who made jokes at cookouts and called referees questionable names at Little League games. That version was still there. He just had a new roommate now. I want to be clear about something. I did not hire a private investigator. I did not go through her phone in the middle of the night. I did not confront anyone in a parking lot, or send anonymous emails, or do any of the dramatic things that make for good television. I simply paid attention. Griffin Sloan, I discovered through the most basic of research, a LinkedIn profile and a building directory, worked late on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Renee, I recalled, had started going to a yoga class on Tuesdays and Thursdays approximately 7 months ago. Renee had never done yoga a day in her life. The woman considered walking to the mailbox light exercise. I also noticed that her phone, which used to charge on the nightstand, now charged in the bathroom. That she'd started laughing differently on calls, lighter, almost girlish, before walking to another room. That she bought new perfume without mentioning it. Small things. Individually, nothing. Together they formed a picture so clear it was almost artistic in its completeness. I didn't say a word. I just started making calls of my own. Lawrence Webb had been my attorney for 9 years. He was the kind of man who wore the same style of suit every day in different shades of gray, and spoke in the measured cadence of someone who billed by the hour and meant it. I walked into his office on a Wednesday afternoon and closed the door. Tyler, he said, you look well. Considering. I need to understand something, I said, purely hypothetically. If a man, hypothetically, wanted to restructure his assets, quietly, legally, before a significant life change, what would that look like? Lawrence studied me for a long moment. How significant, he said. Significant enough, I said. He nodded slowly, opened his desk drawer, and pulled out a legal pad. "Let's talk," he said. The weeks that followed were the strangest of my life. On the surface, everything was normal. Dinner at the table, television on the couch, Renee asking about my health, my medication, my follow-up appointments with Dr. Rowan. She was attentive now, tender, even. The kind of tender that comes from guilt, which feels almost identical to love if you're not paying attention. I was paying attention. And here is the thing that would surprise you, the thing that surprised me. I wasn't miserable. I wasn't walking around the house drowning in heartbreak. I had cried exactly once, in the shower, 3 days after Todd told me. A solid 4 minutes of genuine grief for the marriage I thought I had. Then I turned the water off, got dressed, and made breakfast. Because the man who came back from that hospital bed had decided something. He was not going to perform pain for an audience that wasn't watching. He was not going to beg. He was not going to warn. He was simply going to be ready. I remember the last normal evening clearly. We were watching something on television. I couldn't tell you what. I wasn't really watching. Renee was curled on her side of the couch, laughing at something on screen. Her feet tucked under a throw blanket. And I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something I didn't expect. Sadness. Clean, uncomplicated sadness. Not anger, not bitterness. Just the quiet grief of a man watching the last minutes of something he used to love. "You okay?" she asked, catching me looking. "Yeah," I said, "just thinking." "About what?" I smiled. The same smile from the kitchen table the day she came home. The one that sat perfectly on my face and gave away absolutely nothing. "About how fast things change," I said. She reached over and squeezed my hand. "You've been through so much, babe, but you're okay now." I looked at our hands. "Yeah," I said softly. I squeezed back. For the last time, 3 days later, I moved the money. Not all of it. That would have been obvious, and I was done being obvious. Carefully, methodically, with Lawrence's guidance and the kind of quiet precision that a near-death experience installs in a man whether he asks for it or not. I also changed one other thing, something small that nobody would notice for weeks, the house alarm code. Because here is the thing about a man who comes back from the dead having seen everything clearly. He makes sure that when the moment finally arrives, every door opens exactly the way he planned. She didn't know it yet. Neither did he, Griffin Sloane, with his jawline and his mergers and his Maui tan. But the table was set, and Jasper Bryce was already seated, waiting, completely calm, the way only a man with nothing left to lose and everything left to prove can be. If you've been listening for a while and want stories like this to keep coming, it really helps if you hit that like button and subscribe. 97% of people never do, but it's what keeps this whole thing running. So, thank you for real. Let me tell you about the morning it all came apart. It was a Saturday. Early November, the kind of morning where the sky can't decide between gray and blue and eventually settles on both. I was up at 6, showered, dressed, made coffee, scrambled eggs, sat at the kitchen table with the newspaper, an actual physical newspaper because near-death experiences make you nostalgic for things that slow you down. And I waited. Renee came downstairs at 8:15. She was dressed, fully. Hair done, light makeup, the kind of careful presentation that a woman headed to brunch with Carol puts together. She'd told me about it last night, casually, over dinner. Carol. Always Carol. "You're up early," she said, exactly the way she'd said it 3 weeks ago. "Made eggs," I said. "Sit. Eat before you go." She looked surprised. I had been cooking more since coming home from the hospital. Another thing she'd attributed to my new lease on life. She smiled and sat down, and I put a plate in front of her, and we ate together like two people in a perfectly normal marriage on a perfectly normal Saturday morning. I was the picture of calm. Inside, I was a man watching the final seconds of a countdown he'd started weeks ago. She left at 9. Kissed me on the cheek, said she'd be back by 3. I stood at the window and watched her car back out of the driveway. Then I picked up my phone and called Lawrence Webb. "It's time," I said. "Everything's ready," he said. "Good." I finished my coffee. Let's begin. Here is what Renee did not know. She did not know that Lawrence Webb in the previous 6 weeks had quietly and legally restructured the majority of our joint assets into a private trust, one that I controlled entirely, with documentation that was airtight, above board, and completely devastating. She did not know that the joint savings account, which had held $240,000 3 months ago, now held exactly enough to cover the next 2 months of household bills, and nothing more. Legally moved, properly documented. Every transfer Lawrence had reviewed 3 times. She did not know that I had spoken, on the phone, to her mother. This one requires explanation. Eleanor, Renee's mother, 71 years old, sharp as a tack, and the only person in Renee's life who had ever looked at me and said, unprompted, "You're a good man, Tyler. My daughter is lucky." Eleanor had called me in the hospital. Not Renee. Eleanor. She'd sat on the phone with me for 40 minutes on day 4 of my hospital stay, crying quietly, saying she was sorry, saying she didn't know what was wrong with her daughter, saying things a mother probably shouldn't say but that truth has a way of forcing out of people eventually. Eleanor and I had stayed in touch. She did not know, either, that I had filed for divorce 11 days ago. Lawrence had advised discretion on the timing of the papers. We'd agreed, let her come home on a Saturday. Let the weekend arrive. Let everything feel normal. Then deliver. They walked in at 2:47. I know the exact time because I was sitting at the kitchen table. Same chair, same posture, same coffee mug. And I watched the clock the way you watch a storm rolling in from a distance. You can see it coming. You've prepared for it. And still, when it finally arrives, there's something almost breathtaking about the sheer size of it. The front door opened. Renee came in first, laughing at something, turning back toward the door, and Griffin Sloan walked in behind her, rolling a weekend bag. A weekend bag. Not a handbag. Not a jacket draped over an arm. A full, zipped, this is more than brunch weekend bag. They hadn't even looked toward the kitchen yet. Funniest thing, Renee was saying, because the GPS took us completely the wrong. Griffin saw me half a second later. His hand, still on the handle of the weekend bag, went absolutely still. I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Welcome home," I said pleasantly. "Griffin, right? We've never officially met. Jasper Bryce." I nodded toward the chair across from me. "Sit down. Both of you. There are some things we should probably talk about." Renee's face cycled through approximately 7 expressions in 4 seconds. Shock, guilt, calculation. The specific look of a person rapidly assembling a story. Then she landed on something that looked almost like offense, which, and I say this with full appreciation for the audacity it requires, was remarkable. "Tyler, this isn't." "Renee." I said it quietly, not harshly. "The way you say someone's name when you want them to understand that the version of this conversation where they talk their way out is not available. I'm not angry. I genuinely mean that. Sit down." Griffin cleared his throat. "Maybe I should." "You should sit," I said, still pleasant, "because what I'm about to say involves you too, and I'd rather say it once." They sat. I reached into the folder on the table beside my coffee mug and slid 2 sets of papers across. One to Renee. One, which made her breath catch audibly, to Griffin. "Those," I said, "are divorce papers. Already filed." 11 days ago, I watched Renee's eyes move across the first page. "Lawrence Webb. You remember Lawrence, Renee. He handled our will. He's been handling this. Everything is documented. Everything is legal. Everything is already done." Renee looked up. Her face had gone the color of dry concrete. "The house," I continued, "is in my name. Always was, actually. You may recall you were between jobs when we bought it and the mortgage was under my credit. Lawrence reminded me of that." I smiled pleasantly. "Helpful man." "Tyler." Her voice came out smaller than she probably intended. "The joint account has enough to cover bills through January. After that, your attorney, and I strongly suggest you get one, will work with Lawrence on the settlement. You'll be taken care of, Renee. I'm not interested in cruelty. That was never who I was." Griffin shifted in his seat. I turned to look at him directly for the first time since they'd walked in. I'll be honest with you. I'd spent 11 weeks building up a very specific image of Griffin Sloan in my head. I turned him into something enormous, a threat, a villain. The jawline, the suits, the mergers and acquisitions, and his perfectly divorced availability. I'd made him into something that required defeating. Sitting across from me in my kitchen, caught pale, hands flat on the table like a man waiting to be sentenced. He just looked like a person who had made a very bad decision and was now fully understanding the dimensions of it. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Griffin," I said. "The building manager at Bryson Briggs is a man named Pete Dawson. Good man. Terrible poker face. In about," I checked my watch, 40 minutes, Pete is going to receive a formally documented complaint, co-signed by Lawrence Webb, regarding the conduct of a senior acquisitions consultant who has been conducting a personal relationship with the spouse of a fellow tenant in a manner that created a conflict of interest in shared client meetings. I tilted my head. You'll want to call your HR department Monday morning. Get ahead of it. The color drained from his face so completely and so rapidly that it was genuinely one of the most satisfying things I have ever witnessed in my 44 years on this earth. I picked up my coffee mug. Any questions? I said. There is a version of this story where Renee cried and I softened. I want to be honest with you. She did cry. Eventually, the tears came after the shock, which came after a version of anger that lasted approximately 3 minutes before she looked at the papers again and thought better of it. She cried, and it was real. I believe that, somewhere underneath everything that had happened, there was a woman who had once loved me genuinely, and that woman was grieving something too. But here is what I've learned about tears that arrive after consequences. They are not the same as remorse. They are the sound of a future that was expected, the house, the security, the man who grilled ribs and coached Little League and asked nothing of the world but to be appreciated, disappearing in real time. She wasn't crying for me. She was crying for the version of me she'd assumed would always be there. You planned all of this, she said, not accusing, almost wondering, while you were just here, normal. I was never quite normal after I came home, I said. You just weren't watching closely enough to notice. She looked at me for a long moment. Who are you? She said quietly. I considered the question seriously, because she deserved a serious answer. I'm the man who coded twice on a Tuesday in October, I said, and came back different. Griffin left first, quickly. Without the weekend bag, he'd forgotten it entirely, which I found quietly hilarious and chose not to mention. Renee stayed another hour. We talked, actually talked with an honesty that our marriage had apparently never been brave enough for while it was alive. She told me things. I told her things. It was the best conversation we'd ever had, and also the last one we would ever have as husband and wife. She left at 5. I stood at the window and watched her car disappear down the street. Then I called Todd. I need you to come over, I said. Are you okay? I'm excellent, I said. Bring food. Not from the deli, somewhere good. We're celebrating. A pause. Then, did you? Todd. Yeah? Bring the food. He arrived 40 minutes later with barbecue from the place on Hart Street, and the expression of a man who had been waiting months to hear good news, and was almost afraid to believe it had arrived. We sat at the kitchen table, the same chairs, and I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which for Todd Briggs was genuinely heroic. When I finished, he sat back, looked at the ceiling, and exhaled like a man releasing something he'd been holding for a very long time. Tyler, he said, yeah, you are the most dangerous, quiet man I have ever met in my life. I laughed. A real one. The full, loud, unguarded kind that starts in your chest. The same chest that had stopped on a Tuesday in October and decided, against reasonable odds, to keep going. It felt extraordinary. It felt like the first truly free breath I'd taken in 11 years. I want to tell you where I am now. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Clean as promised. Lawrence was thorough. Renee got what was fair and nothing extra. Griffin Sloan, I'm told, is currently navigating a very uncomfortable HR review process. Todd tells me this with the energy of a man who finds it deeply spiritually satisfying. I sold the house, bought a smaller place. A lot less square footage, a lot less performing, a lot less maintaining the appearance of a life built for an audience. Just enough space for a man, a good grill, and the very clear understanding that every single person in it chose to be there. Dr. Rowan cleared me for full activity at my 6-month checkup. She shook my hand at the end of the appointment and said, "You look better than any patient I've brought back." "I feel better than I ever have," I said, and I meant it completely. Alessia, my nurse, unflappable, seen everything Alessia, passed me in the corridor on the way out. She looked me up and down with the practiced eye of a woman who has watched people heal and people not heal, and knows the difference, intimately. "You good, Mr. Bryce?" she said. I smiled. "The real one. The kind that reaches the eyes." "Alessia," I said, "I am absolutely magnificent. They say when you die and come back you're supposed to have seen a light. I didn't see a light. What I saw was clarity. A clean, quiet, merciless clarity about what mattered and what didn't, about who showed up and who didn't, about who a man truly is when nobody is performing for him anymore. I died on a Tuesday, and the man who came back, he was the best thing that ever happened to me. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being a part of this sphere.